Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Lewis, and welcome to Picks or Players, a Dynasty fantasy football podcast primarily, with also some betting stuff. Just to since this is the first episode, I'm just going to outline, what my plans are for this podcast. On Tuesdays, I want to uh, go over some trades that I've made in some Dynasty leagues, and also talk about some buys or sells that I have in mind. And then on Thursdays, I'm going to go game by game and talk about uh, each game for that week from a dynasty perspective, and also go over maybe some bets that I like. Um, but yeah, no, that's basically it. Uh, I wanted to kind of just give that little intro, and let's just kind of get right into it, I guess. Um, so last week, uh, the first trade I made, kind of going into the week, was a trade in one of my dynasty leagues that I have with college friends. And I traded away a 2025 first, a 25 second that is projected late, and a 26 second. Um, and I got back Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jerry Judy, and Javonte Williams. And so this is a team that I'm aiming to contend with, obviously. That's why I'm trading away some picks. And just for us, where all these picks are basically not my own, besides the 2026 second. Um, but yeah, I was just looking to kind of bolster my depth and also give some long term upside with my team, since a lot of my players are a little older. I didn't really want to wait for the draft because I'm attempting to win now and I needed some more depth. So JSN is definitely a bit of an expensive upgrade when it comes to somebody that, I'm primarily not going to be starting, I think, throughout the rest of the year. But I do think he still has some significant upside for the future, depending on what the Seahawks do in the offseason with DK Metcalf. Um, and he is still a very good prospect in my mind, even though that he has been very inconsistent from a fantasy perspective. However, I do think that there are some underlying factors surrounding that. Just given where the Seahawks are at as a team and how inconsistent they've been offensively. Um, but he did have a good game that week against the Bills, so I don't really feel like he lost very much value at all after this trade. Um, so I'm feeling pretty good about it. And Jerry Judy also had a very good game against the Ravens. It seems like that now that Amari Cooper's gone, him and Cedric Tillman are going to be the guys that generate most of the targets in that offense. And Javonte Williams, it seems like he has kind of stepped up in the pecking order among the running backs, like we expected him to previously in his career. Um, he probably isn't as efficient as he was a couple years ago when he really emerged as the lead back in the Denver offense. Um, but I still think that he is an interesting player. He does have a three down skill set for running back. And it will be interesting to see what the Denver Broncos do with him now that I believe that this is the last year on his contract going into free agency. Um, I still think he's a good player, and maybe there is some potential for him to kind of break out into another offense in the future, especially coming off a great game that he had against the Saints. It seems like he is playing with a lot more confidence now. He didn't really have a great week last week against the Carolina Panthers, but that's okay. I think Jaleel McLaughlin had a touchdown in that game. But overall, though, I still feel like Javonte is a pretty solid running back when it comes from a skill set perspective. I think this is a good opportunity to kind of buy him, even though his price has definitely gone up since the Saints game. Um, I do like Javonte. And like all these guys, I think, are buys. And JSN is mainly more of a speculative buy because, the Seahawks have to decide if they want to keep DK Metcalf this offseason. And if they don't, maybe he is traded to somewhere else. That is going to be an interesting situation to see what happens in Seattle. Um, Personally, as a Seahawks fan, I hope we do keep DK, but you know, from a dynasty perspective, it's hard to really predict what the Seahawks front office is going to do this year. So I think JSN is a safe purchase no matter what, regardless of what happens, with some potential upside if DK Metcalf is moved on from in the offseason. Uh, but yeah, that's that trade. I still feel good about it. I feel like it helps my team a decent amount from a depth perspective, even though it is a lot to give up. I know a lot of other people wouldn't do that, but I also think the opportunities maybe I had in that particular league to get a stud player were not really there. So I appreciate the fact that I can at least acquire somebody that I can have some sustainability from a value perspective going into the off season. I think JSN is a pretty insulated asset from a fantasy perspective. Um, the other trade I made was uh, before I get like there's four trades I'm talking about, but I'm just gonna group the last two together because they kind of involve the same idea. But I also traded away Kirk Cousins, Rico Dowdle, Isaiah Likely, for Jonathan Brooks and a 26 second. Obviously, this is a rebuilding team. Um, I just wanted to move off Kirk on this roster because he's so old and he hasn't really been super consistent this year, even though he has stepped up in some big games. I just think that with the Michael Penix draft pick, it's only really a matter of time until Kirk just loses a lot of value. I'm not sure if there's going to be another team that's going to be interested in starting him on that contract, uh, unless like he starts in like 2026 or 7 after getting cut by the Falcons or something like that. I just don't really know how that's going to work out for them. It's a very weird situation, and I just on a rebuilding team, I'd rather not have my head in the sand when that happens. I'd rather just have him off my roster. Um, but Dowdle and Likely are both two younger players that have had a good year, but I'm not exactly sold on their long term prospects. Dowdle I do think is a good running back, a solid running back for what Dallas has on their roster. Um, but we all know that he's probably not a long term guy. They're going to draft somebody. Um, you know, Maybe Dowdle does sign with another team and withhold some value as a committee back, but that's really all that he is. And those are the kind of players in Dynasty that you should want to sell, especially if you can get like a second or something like that, or an upgrade at running back. Um, and Isaiah Likely, yeah, no, I mean, he has had a good year, and he should still be involved in the Baltimore offense moving forward. But I mean, as we've seen with Mark Andrews and a lot of the other Baltimore receiving weapons, you cannot predict when they're going to have good weeks. It is a fool's errand in a way. And Mark Andrews is probably still a better player as a receiver than Likely. Likely is just a very good athlete, and especially for the tight end position. But he's the kind of player that I was looking to sell ever since week one, after his huge game against the Chiefs, just because I mean it was finally a point where I could get a decent amount of value for his talent level. He was a player, previously that no one really respected, because he wasn't really doing anything. And I wonder if people really thought he was even good. But yeah, no, he was a player I was looking to trade for a really long time. Um, and Jonathan Brooks, he was a guy I have basically no shares of. Uh, in fact, I think in this league, I think I traded away that pick before the draft. Um, and I really regret that because obviously he got into a great landing spot in Carolina. But I guess from one perspective, maybe Jonathan Brooks doesn't have as much value as I think he could have because of Chuba Hubbard. But who knows what happens with that situation next year? Chuba could easily go to another team and be a good back. I think he's probably one of the most, if not the most, underrated running back in the NFL. Um, he could go to a lot of good teams and play really well. I mean, he's a guy I could honestly see traded at the trade deadline if somebody needs help at running back. You know, like him on the Chiefs could be really interesting. Um, yeah, is a very interesting factor when it comes to Jonathan Brooks' value, but uh, and I guess I should say if you can for a cheap price, I definitely would take a chance on Chuba Hubbard. um, but yeah, Jonathan Brooks is a guy that I do like. He's a good prospect, very athletic. Uh, it's just obviously the injury that he's been recovering from, and the Panthers have been very careful, with that, for good reason, because they have long term plans for him, undoubtedly. Uh, but it seems like the Panthers offense is a bit productive in the running game at times. Um, they've had some explosive games there, from a fantasy perspective, and the running backs do have a decent usage. I mean, even Miles Sanders last week was catching a lot of receptions. Um, so yeah, I mean, if Jonathan Brooks can, you know, have a lot of upside in a PPR perspective, along with efficient running, like Chuba Hubbard, I mean, that's great. That's what you want from a fantasy back. So yeah, no, I mean, I think on a rebuilding team where, I mean, it looks like at this point they're just going to keep holding him out for a while because they're so bad. Um, I think that's great for 2025. From a rebuilding perspective. You know, Especially on this team, I have guys like JJ McCarthy who won't be back until maybe next year. So I'm really looking for the long term and just finding guys that I feel like can gain value and break out and be studs. I mean, this is a good time to really buy those rookies that really haven't been performing very well, um, especially because it's like historically rookies break out in the second half of the season more so. So this is a great time to buy disappointing rookies that people are just kind of like ready to give up on because they don't really know. I mean, like you look at guys like in more recent history, like Amon-Ra St. Brown. If you look at his first half of his rookie season, he did nothing. He did absolutely nothing. You look at Christian Watson, his first half of his rookie season, he did nothing. He did absolutely nothing. And I made that mistake with him. Unfortunately, I didn't have any Amon-Ra St. Brown shares, or I didn't buy any at the time. But that I would have loved to have done that rookie season. I mean, he just came out of nowhere in the end of the year and was just the best fantasy receiver to end the season. He was a league winner after basically not really doing anything. He wasn't really getting a lot of playing time. He wasn't getting targets. I mean, he was just nowhere to be seen on the Lions offense, and then became a league winner. So that's the thing, is like you never really know what happens with some of these guys. They can kind of break out of nowhere. Um, yeah, no, I mean that's kind of how I view rookies. Like you just really can't give up on them too early, uh, because you really just don't know too much about them. And teams like to baby their young players because they're young. They're inexperienced in the league. They don't want them to get hurt. Um, so yeah, no, definitely is a good. Right now is a good time to get those rookies that people are willing to move, that have been disappointing or either not playing or whatever, just because you never really know what's going to happen with them. Um, but yeah, moving on after that, these next two trades kind of tie in together. In one league, I sent away a projected late 25 first for Christian McCaffrey. And this is a team where I have Jordan Mason and Gurendo, I believe. Uh, and I was really just looking to kind of get another piece to kind of go all in for. I still have another first, by the way, on this roster, so it's not like I am, really starving for picks for this year. Uh, and I just felt like that was a pretty cheap price for McCaffrey given his injury. I understand the risks. The Achilles tendonitis, is a very, from what I've read, the case is particularly concerning because you never really know. He could easily tear his ACL. Oh, I'm sorry. He could easily tear his Achilles at any point again. Not again, but he could easily tear his Achilles at any point. But he should still have his same level of efficiency. It shouldn't affect his performance when he comes back from this injury. It's just that the injury risk could be kind of high, but for what I'm getting from McCaffrey from a points perspective, I'm willing to pay a late first for that because he can win your league, and yeah, it's like I'm giving an out for a rebuilding team, but that's fine. If I can just get 6 or 7 solid weeks of Christian McCaffrey when he gets back after the bye week, I don't care what happens to him. It's like if I can win my league with him in the starting lineup, with that kind of 20 plus point potential, like why would I not take that? Especially since I have other assets that I can use to go get top players. I'm not overpaying, and it's like it seems like a pretty. It's not a safe investment, but it's also like it's well worth the cost if he does play well, because McCaffrey's the type of player like last year that people were commanding 2+ firsts for because of his points per game output. This is the kind of guy that everyone is just so scared about the running back position in fantasy, in Dynasty. So it's like they don't want to hold these guys and lose their value. But, if you're a contending team, like points are going to be so hard to come by in the trade market, especially like for some of these younger players. Like if you have a young player who's scoring a lot of points, like a rebuilding team or not, like nobody's going to want to move that player. So it's like you're going to have to take a risk on somebody, age or otherwise. And that's why I made that move. Especially I didn't have to give up anything else other than a late first. But that seems like a bargain to me for McCaffrey, given what he can do. If he tears his Achilles, then so be it. But at the end of the day, like I want to win, and so like you got to take that risk if that's available, like, because there's not just any. You can't really get any player like that on the trade market. But yeah, no, I understand why a lot of people wouldn't do that trade, especially if you're in like the middle of the road. But this is a league where I'm in first place, so my roster is already very good. I just want that extra boost. And on a similar note, there's another league where I traded for McCaffrey in a similar type of deal. This is a way bigger trade though, but yeah, let me just kind of go through this. I sent away a 25 first, a 25 second, a 26 second, Wan'Dale Robinson, and a 25 third for Christian McCaffrey, Mike Evans, Rashad White, a 2025 fourth and fifth, and a 2026 fourth and fifth. Let me just repeat that again. A projected late 25 first, a 25 second, a 26 second, a 25 third, Wan'Dale Robinson for Christian McCaffrey, Mike Evans, Rashad White, a 25 fourth and fifth, and a 2026 fourth and fifth. And yeah, this is another team where it's like I am kind of loaded, especially at running back. I also have Jordan Mason on this team. No Grenda though. I just felt like that this was, especially because I already have Henry and Barkley on this team. Even though my running backs are very old, it's just like in my mind, I might as well just kind of go all in as much as I can and get the odds as much as my favor, especially because Mason has been such a big part of my team. I don't want to lose that production when Christian McCaffrey comes back. And maybe I'm thinking about it wrong. Like, maybe they do like a split running back workload, but I mean, it's just still on the same end. It's like the fact that I'm getting McCaffrey, Evans, and White. I think that's very worth what I give up here. I mean, especially because Wan'Dale. I mean, who knows what happens with him when Malik Neighbors is in the offense. Wan'Dale's so inconsistent, and he doesn't offer any air yards upside. I mean, everything that he is going to do from a PPR perspective is dink and dunk. I mean, his upside is that he gets 11 receptions and 50 yards, basically, which is sort of like, I don't really want that. I would much rather have a big play player, even though Mike Evans is not going to be back until week 12. I mean, with Chris Godwin out for the rest of the year on a playoff roster, Mike Evans could be a league winner when he comes back, given how Godwin was producing efficiency-wise with Baker Mayfield. I mean, I was looking at, I think it was an EPA per dropback for wide receivers and QBs, and Godwin and Baker Mayfield was the highest efficiency-wise. So, I mean, with Godwin out, I mean, the sky is the limit for Mike Evans from a fantasy perspective when he comes back. I mean, especially last year with how Mike Evans did in that offense. I mean, he had a great target share, great air yard share. I mean, we all know his talent level as a receiver. And honestly, Rachaad White too, to touch on him a little bit. I think Rachaad White is still so underrated as a running back in fantasy. I mean, we've seen people write him off already because of Bucky Irvin's emergence, but it seems like they want to play both guys. Rachaad White has been really efficient as a receiver, and I mean, that's a strong skill set of his. He's a good pass blocker. They're going to want to play him, especially with how they run their offense. He's not going to be benched for Sean Tucker. I mean, that's just not going to happen. I mean, you might as well just try to trade away your Sean Tucker shares that you spent all your fab on, because Rachaad White's not going to get benched. It's not going to happen. He's just too good as a receiver. I like, you can get him for about a second round price right now, and I mean, I'd easily do that. I mean, if you have like a late second or a 2026 second that a team is willing to give him away for, I mean, like, why would you not do that? I mean, he's still productive with Bucky Irvin on the field. I mean, both backs can be good. Like, this is 2024. Like, the 3-down running back is basically dead. Like, who gives a shit about that? Rachaad White's here to stay. He's definitely a buy. And yeah, I mean, I was originally asking for an early third in addition to these three guys, and then he countered with the 2 fourths and 2 fifths, and I was like, oh, that's fine. Like, that's a lot of assets to kind of divvy around, and at least gives me some more capital to use this year, even though I traded away most of my 2025 picks already in this league. I'll at least still have 5 picks, even though they're all 4th and 5th rounders. I mean, that's fine. I mean, I there's 5 taxi squad spots, so it works out for me. I mean, I can just stash all those guys next year. But yeah, no, I mean, in terms of a final move to make, I'm not going to lose very much value in the short run, maybe, unless there's another significant injury. I mean, Evans and McCaffrey are already hurt, so I mean, it's not like they're going to lose any more value unless there's a setback. But I don't really expect Rachaad White to lose any value unless he gets hurt. He's been too good since Bucky Irvin's emergence. I mean, he's been really consistent. I mean, let's just look at his stats real quick. I want to keep talking about this. The Rachaad White hate is too big. He's too good to to be this underrated in my mind. I mean, like we go to, let's see, this league, and we'll go to click White. And yeah, no, I mean, since the New Orleans game where Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving allegedly killed him, he scored 29.1 points, PPR points, against Baltimore, albeit in 48% snap share, and he scored 15.7 points last week against Atlanta, which, I mean, defensively against running backs, they've been, Baltimore and Atlanta have been pretty stingy against running backs from a fantasy perspective this year. And in both games, he had 6 targets, 6 receptions in the Baltimore game, 5 receptions in the Atlanta game, and at least one receiving touchdown in both games. I don't really feel like this production is touchdown dependent either, because you look at the Atlanta game. If he didn't get the touchdown, he probably would have had like 9 points or whatever. But that's fine. It's not horrible. And also, they didn't really have a great offensive game that game anyway. With Godwin out, and Evans out. So we'll see what he does against Kansas City and San Francisco. Those are legit good defenses, and maybe Bucky steps up more as the lead back. But he's still. Rachaad White is still getting a lot of snaps. It's the offense clearly wants to play him because of his pass blocking and his reception ability. So I just don't really. I feel like this is just a good time to kind of buy low on him, especially because they had such a harder schedule for running backs. If you look past, after Kansas City and San Francisco, they have the bye week. Then they play the Giants, the Panthers, the Raiders, the Chargers. That's a bad matchup, but then the Cowboys and then the Panthers again. You're going to have some great weeks for Rachaad White probably in that stretch. Even with Evans back. So I don't know. I just feel like he's way too cheap now for his talent level. He's still going to be on the team next year too. So, if White doesn't really do anything past this next season, with the Bucks, like let's say they let him go in the 2026 offseason, he'll probably still get picked up as kind of like a Chase Edmonds. I don't want to say that. That didn't really turn out very well for him, but he will definitely be signed as a receiving back for another team that can pass block. He's just way too good as a player, in my opinion, at least. Rushing efficiency be damned, yards per carry be damned. I think Rachaad White is still good. But yeah, no, those are the 4 trades that I made last week. I still feel good about all of them. Obviously, it'd be pretty extraordinary if I felt bad about those trades so fast. But overall, I definitely don't regret it, at least yet, especially with buying CMC or anything like that. But yeah, real quick, let's just kind of go over some buys and sells. Hold on a second. Just go and look at this page real quick. One player I definitely would look into buying is Marvin Harrison Jr. If people are willing to sell him, I guess according to Keep Trade Cut, he's the number 1 faller in the last 30 days. But I think if anyone has watched him at Ohio State, we all know how talented he is. I just think that Kyler Murray hasn't necessarily been utilizing him in the right way. But still, if you look at how, he's getting open deep down the field, and he, I, I, I can't believe that he isn't going to be a phenomenal NFL player. Obviously, Malik Neighbors has looked great, and anyone who bought him, should feel good. Um, by the way, it is very funny that the consensus 101 and 102 have been some of the biggest fallers since the beginning of the season, and the 103 consensus 103 and 104 have now become like the consensus 101 and 102. It's very weird how stuff works out like that. But yeah, Marvin Harrison, I would buy him if you can. I still think he's going to be really good. Um, it's just a matter of time until he has more consistency with Kyler Murray, or maybe the Cardinals move on from Kyler at some point. And if they do and get more of a pocket passer, then Marvin Harrison's value is going to be through the roof. Another player that's kind of interesting is Travis Etienne. I have a decent amount of shares of him, and I've tried moving off of him in some leagues, but it's just that the interest is not there. People do not want to pay a premium to really acquire him because of how good Bigsby has been. Bigsby has been probably the biggest riser, other than Brian Thomas Jr. over the past 30 days, according to Keep Trade Cut. If someone is selling ETN for a second, I'm probably gonna buy him for that. Like, why would he's still so young? He's only gonna be he's about to be 26. So for a running back, that's kind of bad. But if he does get traded to another team like Kansas City or something like that, I am definitely intrigued by that. I think ETN still can be a good running back for fantasy, especially with his receiving skill set. I just wouldn't really sleep on him. He's been so good and consistent for fantasy for the past few years. Like it's just a weird situation. I feel like that's happened this year. He hasn't really been healthy. Bigsby has been very efficient. The Jaguars just kind of suck, so it's like he's not getting a lot of scoring opportunities. So yeah, I just don't think that he's a guy I want to completely give up on. If I can buy him for a second, or like a second and a third, I don't really feel like that's horrible. It's like for a lot of guys that you get in the second and third round. ETN is probably still more likely to help you score points over the next few years than them. Especially you consider like some of the running back. Like if you could have told me I could trade ETN for a guy like, not specifically this, but a guy like Blake Corum and Spencer Rattler. Why would you not do that? Because not specifically these names, for what it's worth, because like I said earlier, I'm not trading rookies away right now. But if I gave up like that type of player, like that, if you could tell me like, oh yeah, you're gonna get like a Blake Corum and Spencer Rattler of those picks, like why would you not do that deal for Etienne? Like what upside are you really getting from those guys right now? Etienne could literally be a guy that comes back and maybe reclaims the workload role for the Jags, or gets traded to a team where he's clearly being utilized in a specific role in a committee, or even more than that. So I just don't really feel like that is a bad price for him, especially for what we know, what he's done in the past. But yeah, no, those are two guys I would buy right now. In terms of sells, honestly, if you can get a third or higher for Sean Tucker, I'm definitely doing that. I mean, this is a guy that has done nothing in his NFL career up for except for 1 week where Rashad White was out. I mean, he's a handcuff. He's does not have more upside than that. I just extremely doubt that Sean Tucker will ever be a fantasy relevant player, especially given his injury history coming out of college. There's a reason why he went undrafted. I'm not trying to sound like a hater. It's just I extremely doubt that that's going to be the case, and I would rather have a third or higher. Like if I could get a third plus even for Sean Tucker, like I'm doing that deal definitely. And then Bigsby, he's having a breakout year right now, but I still don't know. I mean, if you can get a late first or like if you can get a late first for Bigsby, I'm definitely doing that. He's probably a guy that's going to get replaced with this upcoming draft or soon. I mean, he has looked good, to his credit, but the Jags are just like you just look at the team investment. I mean, it doesn't really feel great. Like it's just a third round pick they used on him. It doesn't really feel like to me that he's going to be a guy that they really build around long run for their offense. Maybe he gets another starting year next year because they just have so many needs. But I mean, they're probably going if let's say they do trade Etienne away by the trade deadline and just kind of roll it with him the rest of the season, he probably will be good the rest of the year. And then you'll have another point to maybe even get a higher pick in the off season. But your sell window is not going to be that long because they probably will draft another player if they trade away Etienne or let him go, or sign a free agent. Like I mean, there's going to be a lot of running back free agents available next year. It seems like that Bigsby is going to be a guy that is undoubtedly going to be in a timeshare. They've already been giving Dearness Johnson a lot of snaps with Etienne out. So I mean, I just highly doubt, especially with assuming that Doug Peterson is the head coach next year. I don't know. Even if they do, if they replace Doug Peterson, that's probably even worse for his case because, it's just unlikely to me that I feel like they're going to go into next season with him as the only running back on their roster. Even though he's been so efficient this year, he is coming off a rookie season where he was basically one of the least efficient running backs in the NFL. I highly doubt that. He will be the lead back next year. Outside of that, though, just kind of those are really the main two guys that I feel like. I mean, I have a lot of questions about them because even though they are second year players, their rookie seasons really did not show much for me, and so I kind of am still skeptical that they are going to be long-term dynasty assets in any capacity. So yeah, Bigsby is definitely a guy I would sell if I can get a first, or I wouldn't do it for an early second just because of the potential of him maybe becoming a workhorse back. But if I could get any first round pick, I'm definitely doing that. But yeah, that's basically it for this podcast. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back tomorrow with another one, maybe football or golf related. I'm not exactly sure yet, but I'll let you all know. Thank you so much.